3, 2, 1.
Hi.
Hi. We're in Genesis chapter 24. We're in the middle of it. We're starting at verse 29. By the way, this is the longest chapter in the book of Genesis, but we pay very little attention to it, right?
Mm-hmm. It seems like a repeat story of the finding of a wife.
Finding a good wife gets the most attention in the whole book of Genesis. How about that? So let's read from 29 down to 52.
Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran out to the man by the well. So it came to pass, when he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah, saying, "Thus the man spoke to me," that he went to the man, and there he stood by the camels at the well. And he said, "Come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." Then the man came to the house, and he unloaded the camels and provided straw and feed for the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Food was set before him to eat, but he said, "I will not eat until I have told about my errand." And he said, "Speak on." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master greatly, and he has become great. And he has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when he was old, and to him he has given all that he has. Now my master made me swear, saying, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell. But you shall go to my father's house and to my family, and take a wife for my son.' And I said to my master, 'Perhaps the woman will not follow me.' But he said to me, 'The Lord, before whom I walk, will send his angel with you, and prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son, from my family, and from my father's house. And you will be clear from this oath when you arrive among my family, for if they will not give her to you, then you will be released from my oath.'
I came today to the spring and said, 'O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you are prospering the way that I go, behold, I'm standing by the spring of water. Let the virgin who comes out to draw water, to whom I shall say, Please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, Drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son.' Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. I said to her, 'Please let me drink.' She quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, 'Drink, and I will give your camels drink also.' So I drank, and she gave the camels drink also. Then I asked her, 'Whose daughter are you?' She said, 'The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him.' So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms. Then I bowed my head and worshipped Yahweh, the Lord, and blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you are going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left.' Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, 'The thing has come from Yahweh, the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken.' When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before Yahweh, the Lord." So I think one of the things that occurred to me when I realized the significance of this longest chapter in Genesis is it reveals something in its many details about these Semites that is illustrative of something you never think about as a witness, namely that knowledge of God's providence, of a God who controls the whole world, and knowledge even of his name. is preserved among these Semite peoples. In verse 31, for instance, Laban says, "Come in, O blessed of Yahweh."
Yeah.
And then later on, in verse 50, the thing has come from Yahweh. We cannot speak to... He doesn't want to get in the way of providence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
They certainly believe in God, in one supreme God.
Even if you might call it technically henotheism, that there's one great God and there's other gods. Because it later turns out they have family gods. But we forget that fact about paganism. Paganism is not invention. It's not invented religion.
It's distortions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important. Because remember back in Genesis 9, God had said through Noah, the prophet, Noah prophesying over his 3 sons, said something significant about Shem. He said, Yahweh will be the God of Shem. So the knowledge of Yahweh is preserved through the Semitic peoples, presumably a third of the human race.
Yeah.
And even though the Hamites, the Canaanites here, and the Egyptians are also Hamites, are now overrun by polytheism by the time this is written, about 1800 BC, which always happens in what we now call multicultural societies, where you have empire, right?
Yeah. So these inventions or distortions are handled by God in situations like when he takes action, like Babel,
Yeah.
or even taking the Israelites out of Egypt, where they're surrounded by all these pagan gods, to give them a closer look at the true God, Yahweh.
Yeah. And when you think of it from a JW standpoint, Babel is another attempt of man to consolidate and to keep everything together with a view to, of course, enforcing their agenda. When God says, no, there's something better than that. Spread out, and Japheth, according to Genesis 9, gets the most of the land, but Ham and Shem are fighting in the Middle East for what? Well, Shem for survival. Ham has got the power.
So regardless of the circumstances or the closeness of, like Abraham is close to Yahweh, he's followed him, he's done what he said. You see his servant, you see Abraham, you see his servant, you see Laban and his family all believe. They all have a faith in Yahweh.
Which Rebekah seems to
God.
share.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't kick up a fuss.
That's right. So it helps me to explain why she would just go. Because she can't, she's seen all this happen, and the story's been told, and she thinks, well, that's the hand of God. I better go. So she shows faith. Another just little side point is when Laban goes out, it says, it makes a point that he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist. And then he's very happy and, inviting. I think it just gives you a little glimpse of the character of Laban, because later you find out how much important this is to him. Material wealth.
And the family gods are important to everybody, right?
Yeah.
And a generation into the future, we find Rachel is stealing the family gods.
Yeah, so even though they have some distorted ideas, they do have a faith in Yahweh. Too.
Yeah. And that's parallel with the situation in the book of Job. When you think about the book of Job, you have 5 participants in the dialogue. The knowledge of Yahweh is there. The name is used in the book, but it's not the dominant name. The dominant name, predictably, is El Shaddai, which is what God says about Israel too.
But they also carry with them a lot of distorted ideas.
Oh, they sure do.
Ideas that they gain by their own experience or things that they see. So that they're not completely accurate, but they do have a faith in God.
Which all goes to show why Abraham entrusts this mission to find a good wife for his son, his only son, as he's called. Although he's not technically his only son, is he?
Yeah.
Among his relatives, because he knows the knowledge of God has been preserved. Not perfectly, that's for sure. Here's the quotes. John Calvin, Derek Kidner, on this section.
Okay. Calvin first, he says, he does not therefore boast of his good fortune, but he declares that God has dealt kindly and faithfully with Abraham, or in other words, that for his own mercy's sake, God had been faithful in fulfilling his promises. This thanksgiving, therefore, teaches us always to have the providence of God before our eyes, in order that we may ascribe to him whatever happens prosperously to us. And then Kidner says, for the third time the servant prays. It is a point of interest that he had stood watchful for the answer to make his request. It was the answers that progressively prostrated him.
Yeah, it's all worked out the way he hoped, according to his previous prayers, right?
But he does always wait. That we saw that before. He waits to see the response before he just assumes everything's cool.
And Calvin, they declare that the thing proceedeth from the Lord, because he had, by the clearest signs, made his will manifest. Hence we perceive that although the true religion was in part observed among them, and in part infected with vicious errors, yet the fear of God was never so utterly extinguished. But this axiom remained firmly fixed in all their minds, that God must be obeyed. If then wretched idolaters, who had almost fallen away from religion, nevertheless so subjected themselves to God as to acknowledge it to be unlawful for them to swerve from his will, how much more prompt ought to be our obedience. So I think that's a great point, that the fear of God is never fully extinguished from idolaters and therefore pagans. Paganism, therefore, is degrees. Everybody's got some knowledge that is descended through the generations from, well, our common ancestor.
But so they act on evidence. So they do act with fear of God and faith.
Yeah. And what's our link?
Our link is called Pagan God of JWs, Local, Limited, Dependent. And it's a contrast between J.F. Rutherford and Psalm 139.
Yeah, David's faith in Psalm 139 versus the faith and religion of J.F. Rutherford and his descendants, because they have the same limited local God, even though they don't locate him in the same place as Rutherford did, or Russell, in the Pleiades, in our universe. But their God is still small compared to the Bible God.
Yeah.
See you soon.